This is a common wall lizard. There are hundreds of them in one park alone, but there's a huge problem because these lizards are in Cincinnati, Ohio, a city in the Midwest over 4,000 miles from where they're supposed to be found in the wild. So how did these Mediterranean lizards end up here? And why is Cincinnati the only city in the entire United States where these lizards thrive? What else is living here? And arguably, the most important question of all, how hard is it to catch one? I've traveled to the Queen City, Cincinnati, and I'm here to track down a lizard that under normal circumstances, I'd have to travel halfway across the world to see. My first encounter with these lizards came at a metro park.
I just saw one scurry down in that little crack. There's another one sitting right there.
Not only are these lizards not supposed to be here, they eat insects just like the native lizard species, which means they're directly competing with each other. And these urban wall lizards are evolving. Researchers found that over time, these lizards are getting smaller limbs. They say that this adaptation could potentially mean that the lizards can move through smaller spaces more quickly. Perfect for this urban environment where the lizards were everywhere. I found them in bushes, old brick walls, piles of rocks, on the sides of buildings. I even talked to a bird enthusiast who told me she had a healthy population living in her garden bed. There's so many lizards here in Cincinnati that it's estimated up to 1,500 wall lizards per acre, a density much higher than their home range in Europe. Since this was my first time ever seeing these lizards, I wanted a closer look at them. So I tried to catch one.
No luck.
I kept on exploring a few of the different metro parks here in Cincinnati, and every one I went to, I found lizards. During one of my hikes, I found a frog hopping around at my feet. This is an American toad. It was super chill and didn't seem to mind that I picked it up. These produce a toxin that make them taste bad to predators. I let it go on its way and then continued to explore the parks. Around the world, these are just called wall lizards, but the people of Cincinnati commonly refer to them as Lazurus lizards.
Why they call them that has to do with how the lizards got here in the first place.
In the early 1950s, a 10-year-old boy went on a vacation to Lake Garda in northern Italy, which is about 70 miles away from Milan. He was joined by his stepdad, Fred Lazurus Jr., heir to the family behind the legendary Lazurus department store, which would later become Macy's. While exploring the rocky hillsides, George spotted some speedy lizards darting between the stones. Naturally, he did what any curious kid would do. He caught a few, 6 to 10 depending on the reference, stuffed them in a sock, and smuggled them home through customs. Back in Cincinnati, in the quiet suburb of Hyde Park, George released his exotic souvenirs into his backyard on Torrance Court. And just like that, the Lazurus lizard invasion began.
I'm here at the site of where George originally released the first couple of lizards.
And honestly, it was pretty underwhelming. I was kind of expecting lizards to be crawling all over the street, but all I found was a northern cardinal. George's story sounds completely made up. Some kid releases a handful of lizards, and now they're taking over an entire city. Sounds pretty fake to me. However, George Rao wrote a letter in 1989 to herpetologists at the Cincinnati Museum of Natural History explaining exactly what he did. He went on to repeat the same story over the years several times with the news. And science actually backs him up. A researcher found that the population of Cincinnati lizards has a very low genetic diversity, which means the population got really small at some point, causing a genetic bottleneck and a loss of variation, something you'd expect from starting a population with just a handful of lizards. The evidence suggests that the population could have started with just 3 lizards, which means George's 7 other lizards didn't make it. Rest in peace.
Huh?
The lizards here are darting across sidewalks and clearly thriving in an environment that looks nothing like a natural habitat. So what makes this Midwest city the only place they're able to survive? Well, there's 2 reasons. First reason, believe it or not, the climate here in Cincinnati in terms of precipitation and temperature is almost identical to that of Milan. But climate isn't the only reason why these reptiles have flourished. In their home range, European wall lizards are adapted to living alongside human development. Rocky retention walls are pretty dang close to a rocky hillside. Both have lots of small spaces for the lizards to hide in. So with a similar habitat and climate, the lizards were perfectly adapted for the city before they even got here. Today, the lizards have spread across Cincinnati and even into parts of Kentucky and Indiana. The only other place in North America you'll find them, an unrelated population on Vancouver Island in Canada. Otherwise, this is it. Finally, it was time to catch one of these lizards. Easier said than done though, because these lizards were ridiculously fast. It was pretty easy to see how these lizards have been able to survive this long. I failed to catch one probably like 50 times, but I did find another toad, Nice. I flipped a rock and underneath was this eastern garter snake. Not quite what I was looking for, but without any lizards, it was a welcomed catch. Though completely harmless to humans, they're sort of venomous, but that toxin's used for taking down their prey. I'd bet that this snake has eaten a wall lizard or two.
There's some people playing jazz over there.
At this point, I wasn't convinced I'd be able to catch a lizard. I only had a little bit of time left in Cincinnati, and they'd just run away every single time I got close to them. And that's when I saw one scurry under this rock. I set up my camera just in case. It ran straight into the bathroom, which proved to be the perfect scenario for me to finally be able to safely catch one of these lizards.
Didn't win the bathroom, but I got him.
Although they definitely shouldn't be here in Ohio, and almost certainly competing for resources with the native lizards, and they've pretty much caused irreversible damage at this point, I'll admit they're actually kind of cool. They're so well established here that they're actually protected by law as if they were a native species. I don't think what George did over 70 years ago was a good idea, but I can't say that 10-year-old me wouldn't have done the same, because even as a grown man, I'm still catching lizards in bathrooms. Besides the point, George's Lazarus lizard experiment was oddly successful, and they're an important reminder that wild animals belong where nature intended, not in our backyard because we thought they looked cool on vacation.